Alright, let's watch Star Citizen live, this time all about spaceships. Military spaceships, apparently.
To this episode of Star Citizen Live, all about spaceships, military style. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee, and if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, it's where we take about an hour out of the end of our week, and we chat with some of our developers, and we put some of the questions that come from you, the Star Citizen community, to them. This week's show, in celebration of the launch of Invictus Launch Week today, we are doing a show themed to military vehicles. So basically all questions related to military vehicles. We put a thread up on Spectrum earlier in the week and collected some from there. We'll also be taking questions live from folks who are watching this on Twitch right now. If you're watching the replay on YouTube,
or the replay here.
hello from the past.
Hello.
How's the future?
Well,
Things better?
yeah, well,
let's hope so. Joining us on the show this week, we've got two members of our esteemed vehicle teams. John, no stranger to the show. We'll start with you. Who are you? What do you do for Star Citizen?
Hello, my name's John Crew. I'm the vehicle director for Cloud Imperium.
The vehicle director. Oh, look, there's two of you in there.
Oh.
There we go.
Hello.
We'll move that over there. John is the vehicle director. What does that mean? Because we're going to talk to Ben. He's the vehicle art director here. What does a vehicle director do?
So I look after the 5 vehicle teams in the company. So we have 2 content teams, one in the UK, one in the US. And then we have the 3 more feature-based teams. So we have the vehicle feature team in the UK, the vehicle experience team in the UK, and the vehicle technical team in the US. So it's not just looking at the actual content side, but looking at across the whole spectrum from looking after the concepts, production, vehicle features such as docking, the experience such as missile operator mode, and then the back-end low-level stuff that the vehicle tech team does.
Gotcha.
The whole spread.
And Ben, who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
I'm Ben Curtis. I'm the vehicle art director and the weapons art director for Star Citizen. I guess I look after the vehicles, but purely from the visual side of things. And basically, yeah, John does all the hows and whys and whens and things, and I do the just what does it look like. And I look after the UK team and the US teams.
Fair enough.
that blur is going to freak me out.
So yeah, as we said, if you're watching live, you can submit your questions live. We will be attempting to focus the questions this week exclusively towards military vehicles. There may be a question here or there that apply to all vehicles in general, but for the most part, because this is Invictus and we still have IAE later in the year and everything, we're going to try to focus this one entirely on military vehicles. So with that in mind, let's start off with a kind of obvious question here. What actually separates a military vehicle from a civilian vehicle? Is this only a lore thing, or does it actually have some role in design and even art?
I mean, they all have guns, right?
I could take the start of this. It's no one thing. There isn't like a single defining feature that goes this makes this thing a military ship. It's a combination.
Make it Aegis, really.
Let's talk about the gameplay side first. Traditionally, they are obviously more military-minded, clues in the name, so they tend to be more focused on either offensive firepower than the equivalent civilian ship. So they might have more guns, they might have a larger size equipment of guns. The good example we have is the F-7A Mark II Hornet, which is in Squadron. That is, on the face of it, a snazzier, sharper-looking Hornet, but actually all of its weapon mounts are +1 size, so it absolutely rinses through targets. And then you also have the defensive side, so they might be more armored, they might have more countermeasures. Again, they're designed to be used in military operations where you are expected to be both attacking and being attacked, so they're geared for that. On the lore side, and maybe a little on the actual art side, that military ships in the real world now have very different things to like maybe ships is we'll use ships as the analogy. on a military ship, you'd have the captain's quarters and the XO's quarters and a brig. You're probably not going to have a brig on a civilian cargo hauler because that's
Fair.
not what civilians do. So the facilities on board are different.
You don't know my life.
They will bring gameplay in the future, but it's that combination of stats, role, their usage, and what is inside them essentially.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from a visual point of view, and John's already touched on it, but I think with the military stuff, it's a lot of the functionality is kind of what drives the visuals a little bit more than versus civilian stuff, where we can take a few more.
That just got me thinking about like brig gameplay, because there are ships like the Javelin, and in that Javelin tour, you can actually see that there is like a brig underneath, you know, the mess hall there. As far as like, you know, player gameplay goes, when would that be used in like Star Citizen? You know, like I feel like maybe perhaps what would happen is that if you were to take the Javelin to battle, after you, like, let's say blow up some ships, you could then, I don't know, maybe like use Argos or something to go looking for like escape pods, and then take those escape pods back into your ship, and then you'll have like NPCs to fill up your brig to then take to prison as a gameplay loop. But yeah, that just got me thinking real quick about like, why do some ships have brigs? So probably for the same reason that some ships have like you know, like bounty bays and stuff.
A bit more freedoms in terms of, you know, the stylings, and obviously each
Polaris has a brig.
Still have their particular stylings, but we have manufacturers that make all sorts of ships. But I think the thing is that, yeah, we always try and put the functionality more at the kind of like a higher priority for things like, okay, you know, it'd be great if we could move this room here because it, you know, it feels a bit nicer to walk around, but you kind of got to think, well, actually, what does that mean if you know, if you've got people that are, you know, in crew quarters and they need to get their positions quickly and that sort of stuff. So you kind of get a little bit, I guess, a little bit more thought goes into that side of things.
Yeah, a good example of where some of the lines can get a bit blurred as well is the Carrack. In lore, that was originally like the military. I don't know if it was the Explorer or it was the advanced scout forward base thing.
So just real quickly, to touch upon the topic we were talking about before. So Asimar says, I don't know, CIG said that more than once a player can't be captured by a player for a long time, unless of course they want to for RP reasons, as happened to someone in Conan Exiles, where a player holds another player hostage for a long time or even force feeds them to keep them alive. Yes, so that's fair. They've talked about this, and they've talked about how they can go about this in a few ways, but I was talking about specifically PvE, not PvP. But with the PvP part of this whole thing, they've also talked about how, like, well, right now, how Death of a Spaceman works is that when you die, you get the choice of staying dead and then waiting for somebody else to resurrect you, or getting teleported, you know, like to a hospital. And then how, like, you'll suspend that disbelief of being teleported is that your clone gets spooled up and you're a whole new person who is naked, who has to go back to their body. That same mentality they've talked about before and they've touched upon for when you're captured as a criminal in the bounty bay. You can either choose to, you know, like, go to prison the long way in that player's ship, and then, you know, like, maybe perhaps if you're in a big org you can be saved, or you can by some way, I guess, like, suspend your disbelief and just wake up in prison without having to be there in the bay. But that gameplay will be there either way, but it'll be up to the players to have the agency to either teleport or to be a bounty. That's as far as what I've understood from what they said about this whole stuff.
But the one you have is like the ex-military stock, so it still has those military features on board, but it's used for civilian purposes. So
if you take somebody as hostage as a harassment, who cares? Like, again, they'll have the option to, like, go to prison straight away if they want to, or, like, stay there and be a prisoner if they don't want to, like, die and lose their stuff. Like, is it harassment? I don't think that it's CIG's. I don't think that it's CIG's concern whether or not that's harassment or not, to some degree. I mean, like, because somebody's gonna say it's harassment when somebody else is gonna say it's gameplay, vice versa. It doesn't really matter. Like, I think, you know, like, that's a bit too deep, you know, because you can derive harassment from anything. Like, any gameplay perceived by somebody can be harassment at some point.
It does have that dedicated captain's quarters, but the crew, they're all in a big bunk room with shared facilities where you look at, like, some of the more civilian ships that everyone has individual quarters, because that's you're not in the military. You're not conditioned to being bunking with your entire crew. You want your own little bit of space, your own facilities on board that you can just tuck away yourself.
Gotcha. All right. So basically, it's a mix of just all manner of things. It's role and look and history and to some extent even design and capabilities.
Yeah.
Okay. The number one most voted on question that we had from the thread, what can you tell us about future plans for more military ground vehicles? Obviously, we have the Nova tank making its way in with Alpha 313-1. So what can you tell us about more military ground vehicles and maybe even potentially alien military ground vehicles? People love their Tavar and Prowler.
Yeah. It's something we definitely want to do, but I'm not in a position to give any specifics at this time. It's certainly something that we are looking into.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, quite a lot of work went into some of the setup on the Nova. A lot of work went into the tank treads, and it'd be great to not just have that done for one ship and to be able to be able to build on that. And I think there's loads of exciting stuff we can do. When you see a lot of our ground vehicles kind of working well, it kind of inspires to do more. I like ground vehicles anyway.
I feel like the tank has to be or the Tonk even has to be one of CIG's most successful ground vehicles out of the gates. The treads just work, and it's just a good vehicle all in all. I mean, just look at the state of the Gravlev bikes and that kind of thing. But obviously, they're not going to make treads for one vehicle, and then that's it. All that R&D spent making those treads simulate perfectly for one ship is kind of silly. But I would like to see more. That being said, I'm not really sure exactly how many more kind of ground vehicles we need for that kind of combined arms experience for now. I'd love to see the Tumbrel Ranger, the bike, but apart from that, and of course, the Origin ships that they've announced. But apart from that, I can't really think of anything else they'd want to add just yet, unless of course it doesn't take that much time to make. But seeing we already have the Cartual. I mean, not the Cartual. Sorry, the Xi'an Nox even. So we have one alien speeder. So to see an alien tank or whatever. The Xi'an are known for their Gravlev, so a Gravlev tank would be kind of interesting to see. But I don't necessarily think that much time should be spent just at the moment making alien versions of the things we have ground level, if they're not going to show up in Squadron 42.
And I know a lot of the team, they're a lot of fun to work on. So I think
Yeah, I think
watch this space.
A lot of the questions that came up in the thread were, are you going to do this or are you going to do this? This type of vehicle or that type of vehicle. And unfortunately,
what about the X1, Alvin?
Live stream on a Friday is not where we would typically announce a new vehicle or our intentions to do a new vehicle in some way, shape, or form. So while we do appreciate all those questions that came in, these things do have very specific rollouts and stuff and plans and stuff like that throughout.
But then considering the X1, I feel like the reason why that's not out, even though it's such a tiny little bike, is the fact that Gravlev as a whole is not in a good place. So they wouldn't want to release the X1, even if it's ready, visually and everything else. They wouldn't want to release the X1 until Gravlev is in a better place, because from a marketing standpoint, you don't want to release a thing that doesn't even work, and Gravlev bikes barely work.
The year, so that's where we don't announce them on a Q&A live stream. That's not where we do it.
Like Ben said, though, we don't want to just do work for, we've done the Nova tank.
The DS works,
be the only vehicle in the game that's ever going to have tank treads. We want to have some use out of it. I think if you even look at the old Nova tank concepts, there was a hover version in there originally, which would use our existing Gravlev. I saw Ben's eyes go very wide there. So there's certainly lots of options we can pursue.
And I think, as we were producing the tank, even in our review meetings and things, a lot of ideas were thrown around. It'd be great if we could do X, and great if we could do Y, and it's it would be
it would be great,
so,
but it's all about execution.
I hope so.
And everybody knows the way that we prefer to announce our ships is to have them data mined from game files. So
That's a jab, Jared. That's a jab. But data mining from game files happens in every single video game. It's up to the developers to like decide whether or not they want their files to be in there to be data mined in the first place. And you know, if you're not going to curate your files so that people can't, it's kind of on you.
How rare are military-based capital ships like the Polaris supposed to be? And is the rarity even a factor anymore after they've been made available year after year after year?
I think the only aspect of that I can touch on in my role is like the factor of it from a design and sort of gameplay experience side. It's not something that we factor in, because if we take the current scenario now, imagine a world where we'd released a ship that there was only 50 of them ever created. And
looking at you, Bengal carrier.
From a gameplay side, we have to consider the scenario that all 50 of those would turn up in the server right now today,
right,
and not destroy everything and have an equal and enjoyable experience. So from my side, as the gameplay side, the rarity of them is not a factor. We have to consider those sort of scenarios.
Yeah, so like it's interesting John says this because there is an obvious artificial scarcity within Star Citizen. Is John saying that the scarcity of things like the Aegis and the Javelin on the store, is he saying that doesn't really have any connection to, I suppose, gameplay? It's a little bit more arbitrary than some might think. But yeah, I mean, like, just look at games like Eco or any game that has like an economy that's driven by players. We ran an Eco server where we had a limited amount of money, so not ships or like other commodities, just money. And then like one player like spent a lot of time accruing all this money, and then they stopped playing. Then all of a sudden, like 10% of all currency ever printed within our Eco community was now locked away in this player's bank account who wasn't playing anymore. So like in that same kind of scenario, like you have to like, I guess, think about those sorts of things. If they were to make a ship that's like super, like, you know, like rare, then what about when all of them show up? What about when none of them show up? And then it's just like a rumor, you know?
And of course, as the scale of the game changes, you know, year after year, as the game continues to grow, as more tech comes online, as more backers enter the community and stuff, all of those scale numbers change and shift, and they grow along with it. I know it very commonly, you know, throughout Star Citizen's history, there's been, you know, there will only be this many ships, and then 2 years later there's more, and then there's 2 years later there's more. It's like, well, because it's a percentage of the overall population that we're, you know, aiming for, and as the population grows, so too can the number of these ones that are offered to the community. So let's see, what else do we got from the chat? Let's look for something from the chat. When you look at the list of military vehicles that are in game right now, scroll by, what do you see as still missing or needs to be filled out more?
Good question.
We obviously have a lot of military ships in the game.
Yep.
It's one of the questions that people ask me quite a lot. It's like, why do we have so many combat ships? And
there's a war occurring. That's why
people enjoy playing them. But in terms of stuff that's missing, there are a few gaps that are less populated than we'd like, because we want to provide choice for players when they're playing a game. And if you've only got one ship of that type, then that's no choice. Like a good example would be the Nautilus. That's quite a niche military role in
really
being
niche,
a mine
just
layer,
a mining ship.
And we only have this sort of very large ship capable of deploying one size of mine. So there was naturally an opportunity there to both expand that in sizes each way. We could do a much larger one, we could do a much smaller one, or something to do with the actual mines themselves.
Yeah, I mean, also in the lore itself, I mean, there are many different kinds and classes of ship that don't exist yet within the, you know, the UEE Navy. You know, as far as like, you know, classes, so like a Bengal is a class of ship, and Aegis is a class of ship. So like but yeah, anyway, so like no, yeah, I'm right. So yeah, Bengal's a class, Aegis is a class, but like as far as like types of ship, so like battleship, like, so carrier, we have the Bengal is a carrier type, right? The Idris is a what is the Idris's type? I forget. I think the Idris is a frigate type, right? So like We don't have battleship types, even though battleship types are mentioned in the lore. We don't have battle cruiser types. We don't have cruiser types, light frigates, transport or tanker type military ships. Many of these things are kind of covered by other like non-UEE ships, you know, like for instance, Starfarers are transport ships, you know, Hercules are transport ships. They can be used in this way. In IAE, they are used and contracted in that way. But, you know, as far as like the lore is concerned, battleships, battle cruisers, frigates, transports, and tankers are things that are mentioned but don't exist yet in any like perceivable way.
I mean, I'd quite like to see. I quite like the smaller ships anyway. I think I enjoy the challenge of trying to get all the functionality and features we need into a nice small package. So I think doing like
I think tanker would mean like something like a Starfarer, but even bigger, like barrels, something capable of like transporting a lot of like fluid cargo.
all kind of single-seater reconnaissance like vehicle, something that isn't necessarily armed to the teeth, but can just get in and get out. I think it would be quite fun. Military Merlin. I don't know.
A military Merlin.
Military Merlin.
Terrapin on wheels.
I honestly wouldn't mind a Terrapin on wheels.
I love the silence when he said that. People are like, wait,
Just
John was cracking a joke?
you stick the wheels on the bottom of the thrusters. Just let it roll around like that.
Okay.
I love
chat,
how deadpan this dude is.
Is the Banu Merchantman a military vehicle?
Ooh, I forgot to turn alerts off.
I'm not a law person, so
Thanks
I
for the
don't
prime,
know what
man.
the Banu do in terms of military for classification, but
Dude, Banu have a military.
it's more
They
a
must do, right?
civilian thing. Therefore, I can't talk about it on this show.
I tried, chat. I tried. It's not a military vehicle. Sorry. Yesterday we introduced
Do the Banu have a
community to
military?
the RSI Scorpius, the new two-seater fighter from RSI. Couple questions in the chat about the Scorpius. Can the Scorpion turret, or does it have like an actual name? The type of turret?
It does have a in-law name in the brochure. I can't remember what actually it is. It's just a remote turret on a
Yeah, I
on a
forget
track.
what the Scorpius is
Can it be slaved to the pilot if there's only one person flying?
They
If you slave
confirmed in
with
the
a blade
Q&A.
like any other turret, any other remote turret, it'd be the same functionality. So if the pilot chooses to do that, if they want to solo it, then it would be slaved and it would be locked in the upper position in a forward arc where you can look, which is pretty much the consistent rule for all scenarios like that.
In a situation like that, where you had the Scorpion's like turret locked and, you know, as he said, slaved. I don't actually know what the current firepower is for something like a Saber, but wouldn't that just make it an alternative to a Saber? I feel like of course, the best thing about these two people ships is that even though they have like a lower durability and like tissue paper hulls compared to like things like the Saber, is that like because they have that crazy firing arc, like if you try and circle strafe somebody, you'll always be able to be on top of them because like while they have to point their nose to you, like as long as you have this kind of like arc on them, like you'll always be able to deliver damage even if you haven't like actually revected towards them yet. Twice the firepower of the Saber. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. But again, its hull is much worse. So like if the Saber gets the jump on them, which it might do because the Saber is supposed to be more stealthy or can be more stealthy, then yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't think that like all of these ships are designed to go like, I'm here, you're there, I see you, we fight. Like finding them using scanning and stuff when that comes, and I feel it's supposed to be a part of that whole equation as well. And it's something that we haven't really experienced yet, and we might only just start seeing that with the new scanning stuff, but that's been pushed now to 3.15, so we'll see.
Okay. Let's see. Do you think it looks more like an X-Wing or a Star Fury from Babylon 5?
It's more of a Star Fury, but can they say? Are they allowed to say? Will
think
the lawyers
Star
allow them
Fury.
to say?
Honestly, I think it looks way more like the Star Fury.
Yeah,
On
it
a
is
very
Star Fury.
obvious first read is
Yeah.
At like first glance, it is very X-wingy, and then you notice the differences in like the swept wings and just the angles, it's not quite as
Star
much as
Fury for
it seems
scale.
on first glance.
Yeah, there's actually a there is a very popular account on Twitter called the Spaceshipper. We're going to throw a little plug out to the Spaceshipper.
The Spaceshipper.
Wonderful account that tracks the development of spaceships in all genre and media and stuff like this.
Okay.
And I actually reached out to him and I asked him how many different X silhouetted ships have existed in sci-fi, and he sent me a list of 11 different X-shaped sci-fi ships going all the way back to 1929 and La Femme sur la Lune, which is a French sci-fi film that whose name I just butchered. So a very common silhouette in sci-fi, and I'm amazed it took us this long to actually get to one, but we had to hit it at some point. So luckily it looks as cool as it does. But yeah, definitely, I think more Star Fury than X-Wing personally. What else we got from the chat here? All right, this isn't from me, I swear. When the Genesis Starliner was first introduced, there was a mention of a military troop transport variant, as well as mentions of the Star Seeker and Star Hunter variants as well. Are these actual variants plans or just ideas to be considered?
It's a very tortuously related question just to talk about the Starliner in here.
I was going to throw like whoever this is knows that they were going to get their question asked because I'm a mark for the Starliner, but that is not from me.
We have a lot of ships in lore that vary from like quite in-depth explanations on the Galactopedia and just one line mentions in sales text or like one line in a lore piece somewhere. And whilst we do have a lot of ships, we're not going to make every single ship that has ever been mentioned in lore. So first and foremost, we'll do the Starliner as was promised. And then after we've done that, then we can always look at actual variants for it.
I mean, how many people would have purchased or pledged for a ship based on, like, let's say, a snippet about a ship that's related to it? I hope that not many, but I could see that being an issue for some people. You know, like the Hawk is supposed to have like the Dark Hawk or something like that as well. But again, you're not pledging for that ship. You're pledging for the ship that's on the brochure, not the one that's, like referenced. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
I really like the Crusader stuff, so yeah, I can poke John a bit about it.
But it wasn't part of the pitch. Is my point. It was talked about like as it's part of this lineup. So you're not buying that. You're buying the actual ship's picture that you see. You're not buying the variant that could be, right?
Yeah.
See what we can do. We come to tackle it.
It'll be the only one left after the end of this year. The Crusader ones.
Well, no, there's still the Ares.
You did,
At the end of this
Asimar?
year.
Oh, so you're
Why?
You're saying something there.
I think it's on the road. I hope it's on the roadmap. If not, well, there's your spoilers.
I actually don't know if it's on the roadmap.
I'm going to go look at the roadmap now.
The roadmap doesn't. I don't work on the roadmap.
The arrow, yes.
It is on the roadmap. You're covered. Good job.
Or the Talon, actually. The Talon.
The Starliner, which was the very first Crusader ship that was introduced, and before we had further refined that the Crusader style, I imagine it's probably going to go through some revisions when
the arrow handling.
Not a military ship, but I don't care. It's my show. You were saying?
Yeah.
I think we both said yes.
Yeah, to be honest, we'll have to have a discussion about it when we get to it. I think we have, just because a manufacturer like take the RSI for example, we have RSI ships that look very different compared to what we've done with the Scorpius, and I think it's fine as a universe with all these manufacturers in it to have different ages of the same manufacturer. You look at 1980 Fords versus Fords today, and that's in a relatively short period of time that they've been making their cars. And I think so. I don't want to be in a position where all of our ships look you know,
like variants of each other.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I do think it's really important that we have kind of common language and you know the kind of like the core kind of elements of the design language for a particular manufacturer to be. You want to be able to walk onto a ship and know who made it,
Right.
like from the start, if you know what I mean. And I think I'd rather focus on that side of things than making things, you know, always feel like, say, just a variant of the same thing, pulled out a bit and the wings have been made a bit wider and stick a load more seats in it and job done.
I feel like they've succeeded on that term. I mean, you go into any like Aegis ship and you know you're in an Aegis ship. You know, they have that like the quilted sides and everything like that.
To treat your point like a 60s.
Like you go inside an Aegis Reclaimer, you go into a Hammerhead, you go into an Idris or a Javelin, and they all have that same kind of vibe to
Like
them.
a 67 Ford Mustang doesn't look a whole lot like a 97 Ford Mustang and doesn't look like a 2007 Ford Mustang. Those are only 20-year
Yeah, I mean, Mustangs
gaps.
had that kind of
And we've got
awkward period,
100-year
didn't they?
gaps in some of our ships. So
Yeah.
I hear you. And then even in the present time, like a company like Mitsubishi makes, you know, a 3000 GT, makes an Eclipse. They also make an 18-wheeler, you know, a long-haul tractor trailer, and they make TVs, and they don't look anything alike. So.
Yeah, modules are coming though, Asimar, but that's a bit different. Modules are different from variants mentioned like as flavor text though. Like the Retaliator is getting modules. The Retaliator modules you can see on their website. You know, they have things like dropship modules, like living habitation modules and stuff like that. Bounty Bay modules. The Caterpillar could get those as well. Modularity is something they're working on actively. That's on the roadmap. Again, the first modular ship was supposed to be the Retaliator. It's supposed to be coming in 315 now, so like in the third quarter of the year. After that, then I don't suppose it's you know, any stretch of time until we get the Caterpillar doing the same. We now have docking tech, and we'll be having modular tech, so the Caterpillar could be, you know, like the next to go gold after that, like sometime either at the end of this or next year, because then you can get the command module off, and also you might have the choice of modules for it as well. But we'll see.
All right, fine, chat. I'll ask. What can you tell us about the Polaris? Anything?
What ship? Sorry,
The Polaris?
I don't know.
RSI's Dorito.
It's another RSI ship. It was it's like a torpedo-y kind of thing.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
So I'll give the ever popular answer of it is not in active development right now as of this second as I talk.
Yeah,
but we
we'll
have
see,
done
Asimar.
a complete concept update pass on it. So when it is ready to go into production, it is all there, all worked out. All the corridors and rooms have been brought up to modern standards for all the metrics, all the usables. We've pulled in a lot of reference from the Bengal interior into it, so it's
interesting.
All the RSI interiors, like
yeah, it is RSI after all.
The Mantis took inspiration from the Connie, and you can see it, but they're not the same.
No.
And it's similar between RSI's larger capital ships, Bengal, Polaris, and between those two, that it is the Mantis and Constellation. And the other thing that's the big change on the Polaris is it did get a bit bigger, as all things do, but the trade-off for that is now the hangar is to the standardized metric for the fighter size class that it's supposed to hold. So it's not a very weird size that it was. It is a standard, like, I always forget what the player facing category is, but internally dev side it's an extra small one. So that's your Gladys's, Sabres, they will all fit in there.
Okay.
And the Scorpius.
And the Scorpius
so the Scorpius will fit inside the hangar.
In its folded wings back position.
Right, don't try to.
I mean, it will fit in if you put it the other way. You just might not have your wings left. I know what people are like.
Yeah, so hopefully you'll be able to fit things like your Mantis, but the issue with that is the fact that like even the what metric is the Carrack's Bay, or is the Carrack's Bay not an actual merit? I think the cataract. I think the Carrack, its bay is bespoke, and it's not like extra small or anything like that, because like it's designed just for the Pisces. And if you try and put something like an Arrow inside, which would fit in the extra small pad category that John mentioned, in the landed state, the wings will be clipping with the old like hatch. So we'll see.
All right, so yeah, it's many of the questions we're hitting that part of the show here where a lot of the questions in the threads were, can you give us an update on this ship, and can you give us an update on this ship? I do want to say, using John's answer for the Polaris as a baseline here, not every ship is in active development at all times.
So you know what will be interesting? So we don't really know what the interior of the RSI Bengal looks like. We might have seen a snippet here or there, but I forget, right? The Polaris is coming out whenever it comes out, and that's supposed to have the same design language or similar to that of the Bengal because they're both of the RSI line. We haven't seen the interior of either of those. The only multi-crew RSI ship that we have is the Constellation. We might be getting the Apollo at some point. I wonder if the Constellation's interior, let me not mince my words, looks crap, right? Like, is that what the interior of the Polaris is going to look like? Or if the interior of the Polaris changes, to be really cool looking, and so that's what we expect the Bengal, will we then expect them to redo the Constellation lineup? What will the interior of the Apollo look like? And is the Apollo going to be more of like what's a signifier of what the the Polaris and the Bengal look like? I wonder.
So sometimes when you're not hearing about a ship, it's because there is no new information to give about the ship. It's not in active development.
Yeah, because we've seen an Apollo corridor before. Is that what the corridors of the Bengal and the corridors of the Polaris will look like? Because it's an RSI ship, right? It's a medical ship, a very specific ship, but it's an RSI ship.
Keep that in mind when measuring your expectations for
a new one that's not out yet.
It's very much kind of dependent on we may have few big ships in active development, or we have lots of little ships in active development, or some ships we might jump on, do a bit of work on, and then actually something else comes in, and
that's a good point there. I think it is caveated on the roadmap tracker that
I hope so.
I see the comments on Spectrum and Reddit a lot of this ship on the roadmap stops in this quarter. That means they're finished. That doesn't necessarily mean we're finished. We quite often pause things to go work on something else.
Like from an art point of view, you might have at the early stages of the ship, you might have 3 artists working on it, but then as we get towards kind of further through the pipeline, it's actually it makes more sense actually if we bring in 5 artists onto this ship now, and then we can close it out a little bit quicker, or we can spread the work out a little bit more evenly, and so things do stop and start, and sometimes even you'll work on a ship and then you're like, okay, well actually we've got to a point now where we need to hand it over for another department to do their work, but they focus on another feature, so it's going to be a while before we get their work done on it, and there's no point in us kind of like steamrolling off into the sunset to deliver everything, and then at the end of it go, oh actually we didn't support this feature and that feature. So
well, roadmap's dynamic, we know that already.
We work on a quarterly process, and our planning is quarterly, so we react quarterly as well.
And for those asking, so what ships are in development?
I don't know if the Polaris is in Squadron.
The public roadmap is basically how you can, if it's listed on there, it's in active development, and if it's not listed on there, let's see what else we got. So we did the Polaris. Let's do the Pegasus. That's the other big one that's all throughout chat. What can you tell us, if anything, about the Pegasus escort carrier?
Not a huge amount. It's still a thing. It's still primarily going to be used for Squadron, but it's not in Episode 1, so there's no active movement on it.
Sorry, I missed that. What ship?
That's the other big one that's all throughout chat. What can you tell us, if anything, about the Pegasus escort
Pegasus,
carrier?
Okay.
Not a huge amount. It's
so it's
still a
not
thing.
for Episode 1.
It's still primarily going to be used for Squadron, but it's not in Episode 1. So there's.
So I mean, once they get all the tools for Episode 1 of Squadron 42, how long do you reckon it's going to take for them to make Episode 2? Like, I think it takes maybe 2 years for like an established FPS company like Treyarch to make like their new version of Call of Duty. They I think Treyarch and Infinity Ward, they go back to back, like to make their story modes and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not going to be like a short thing.
There's no active movement on it.
Okay. Have you ever considered a military ambulance Land Rover? That's a very specific Question: Have you ever considered a military ambulance Land Rover?
Land Rover.
That's someone who spent a lot of time in a military Land Rover ambulance.
Almost certainly. Almost certainly.
Yes, we have considered it. Is the short answer.
They have. Interesting.
I say I like ground vehicles.
Ground vehicles are cool, but I mean, like, I think that ground vehicles are cool, but at the same time, there's not really enough in the game at the moment to make them viable fun. I mean, like, there aren't enough places to control anymore. Jump Town doesn't really exist anymore. But, like, you know, I look forward to the day when we have, like, more settlements out there with roads connecting them and that kind of thing. I think it will really, really make the game cool. But, of course, we'd probably have to wait for things like, server meshing, right? So that the server doesn't have to, like, freak out and, because, you know, with server meshing, we're going to be having, like, what? Instead of one server serving the entire world or the entire universe, we'll have one for planets or one for stations or big ships even. And then they'll be able to do things like that. But until then, I mean, like, I like the idea of ground vehicles, but I just don't really see much gameplay opportunity for it, apart from, you know, like, things that we would do, you know, like, get to Hercules and get, like, some tanks out and have a battle, you know?
Palette cleanse.
Anything you can tell us about the antennas and stuff for the Carrack? The antennas, the bridge sliders, the stuff that's still outstanding for the Carrack.
The jump antennas will be there when we have jump points.
Okay, so they're going to be...
The shutters, I think when we did the model of it, we left them off because we weren't quite sure how we wanted to do them. We modeled them out, proved it out in concept, but we never transitioned that to actual in-game. And we have been doing some performance work on the Carrack, which maybe Ben can talk about what and
performance
why
work
we were
on the
doing
Carrack.
it.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
now...
I think so part of the I guess what we were talking about before, yeah, we have times between ships, and one of our artists, we decided to kind of put a bit more of a focus onto looking at our ships and our processes and working with the graphics team and the rendering team to see what performance costs we can save. I guess one of the in our game, like John's mentioned, you know, there can be points where you could have a large number of the same ship turning up, or you might have, you know, a number of completely varied ships turning up into kind of one player space. And what we're finding is that whilst our ships were okay when you were kind of up close and personal with them, when they were kind of off in the distance, we were hitting some not great performance budgets. So we kind of just took a step back, took a look at it, worked out what we could and couldn't do, and just through sort of a better understanding of the way our engine works, we kind of made significant improvements on the Carrack. The Carrack was, it's not by any means our kind of worst performing ship, but it was kind of middle of the ground. And we've got a lot of ships that actually, off the back of that, we've then kind of looked into and gone, oh, actually, do you know what? These are actually, they're working pretty good and they're set up well, and we're quite happy with this. But a lot of the things as well is, without going, I could probably talk about it for like an hour.
I'm not sure what you mean by performance. Like, how do they fly, or like
a lot of our kind of like initial
resources
for our team and our you know, we have kind of the rendering cost budgets that we set out, like
rendering
really
cost
early on in
budgets
the project, and then over the years, as more features and more kind of complexities have come into it, we have to kind of go back and revisit those and go, actually, yeah, is it achievable to deliver the ships to the visual standard that we're aiming for, and that support all the functionality that we require, and still be those original budgets? And the short answer is no. You know, by the time we kind of go in, and even just things like the dashboard interaction system, that, you know, separating off all those individual elements into their own interactive buttons and things like that adds costs. You know, if you look at what we've done with the Gladius recently and adding in all the kind of the ship component panels and the
going
axis
gold
panels,
standard, yeah,
that's all work that we've kind of got marked on to do for our
all the other ships.
But that all impacts costs. So what we need to do is, yeah, we don't want to just be piling in feature work and then suddenly being at a point where, yeah, we've completely tanked the performance. So what we're kind of trying to do is every time we're adding something in, we're revisiting the way we create the assets and see where we can make savings. And with the Carrack stuff, like I say, a lot of it was just really digging into the kind of like we know where we can save performance, but it's really spending the time and kind of getting into the details, and a lot of it's to do with our like our lighting setup, our vis area setup, the way we do our LODs, and you pull really far away from our ships, and a lot of the details that when you're working up close on a ship and you're manually doing these LODs, you can get a little bit kind of tunnel vision on what you're working on. So it's kind of actually looking at things and how they're going to be used in the game. So I'm rambling.
Yep,
yeah,
a little bit.
Performance wins on the Carrack. That was our first one.
All right, so performance optimizations. So it's stuff that they would need to do, because as he says, because when you add things like how we have on, let's say, the Hercules has, like a state-aware buttons for lighting and, opening doors and locking them and changing the sensors. Having things like that in your ships impart a cost onto it more than just how big they are, their graphics and everything else like that. So by saying that they have made these changes to the Carrack, I have a feeling that maybe perhaps does that mean that, because of this, now they can go into the Carrack now and make things like the lift buttons work better, and to add buttons on the doors and stuff because with all these performance wins, they can now put these things that these newer ships now have. I feel like it's like a process they'll have to do before they can make things go gold standard like the Gladius is at the moment. So is that an inference that the Carrack is closer to being in that gold standard map? Who knows? It's a relatively newer ship. It's only over a year old now. So I feel like because of that, there isn't much to do with it to make it go gold standard. A lot of the components are already in and modeled in the Carrack and stuff like that, and it'll mostly be to do with the bridge and then adding light switches and stuff on the ship as well. So looking forward to that.
And we'll be rolling on to more as we kind of chip through the backlog.
Yeah, hopefully players don't even notice a visible difference on it either.
No.
Yeah. If anything, the only
we've
thing
been improving the visual pop and the kind of the
using my
LODs
words
by just spending a bit more time thinking about exactly what the player sees.
And to give, I think, a rough ballpark number, you can now have 2 Carracks on screen for the cost of one of them previously.
Okay, all right.
And most of that's gone into 3.13.1. I think there might be a little bit more coming in 3.14.
Yeah, there's one or two things you might notice that we didn't quite get time to kind of close out in time for 3.13.1, but it was better that we put it in with the performance gains that we did achieve. And there might be one or two things that we just had to kind of go back and tweak. There's a little window that doesn't quite look right, and yeah, just minor details, but yeah, mostly went in.
Okay,
Gotcha.
Right, that's fair enough, really. I mean, I guess optimization and stuff like that is something that just is an ongoing thing, as they iteratively develop stuff. An interesting one that I always hear is that I always go back to is when they talk about how they've been improving with the player armor. Initially, the heavy slaver armor, what is now what they call the Citadel and Fortifier helmet, is well, back in the day, before it became Citadel and Fortifier, it used to have more polygons than the current Constellation does right now. So it's it's something that as they go on, they'll just keep working on and making sure that things work the way they should, because end of the day, we want massive fleet battles and stuff like that, right? Yo, thank you for the 12 months, Pyro. Thank you, man.
I know the answer to this one, but I want to see if I can prove a point here. A bunch of people in the chat are asking about the Crusader Jupiter carrier.
Crusader Jupiter carrier. You what, mate?
That's what I thought. Crusader Jupiter carrier.
Google.
Yeah, no. It's a ship that exists in the lore. It goes back to our question that we had earlier. There was a portfolio for Crusader Industries in last year, maybe March or April, depending on when it came out. I read it when we were proofreading it before, but it was March or April. That goes back to the things that are
in the lore,
that created for our lore and to flesh out the universe is not synonymous one with ships that are in active development with the ship team. So.
Also, I mean, with the lore team, I feel like when they do things like that, they should probably put a year on it. If they talk about the Crusader Jupiter carrier randomly, they should say, way back in 2210 or something like that. So even if it did exist, you wouldn't want a 600-year-old ship, I'm sure some of you would, but as in just to have, like to use. I don't think that's the case, like but as far as the history of these, the game ships and that thing, like what ship is it, the Aegis ship that they keep talking about, the Aegis Zeus or something like that, right? Like it's an old ass Aegis ship that like we know the name of, but you'll never see in game because it's like just the ship that they built upon to create the ships we now have. It's not supposed to be something that you can use.
So I thought I would ask specifically to prove that point that we just made before. We're not playing with you or trying to hide anything. They're separate. We can pull from that, for inspiration and stuff, at times, but we're not going to create every single ship that exists in the lore of our universe. When you create a galaxy, has to be thousands and thousands and thousands of ships that populate it. So,
well, we have the Talons and Prowlers, and they're from 2650. Shut up.
Separate worlds. That said, during Invictus this year, and then of course with Xenothreat before and stuff, we are now seeing Idrises and Javelins making their appearances in the persistent universe. With Invictus, people can now tour select sections of a Javelin for the very first time. Does this mean that the ships are finished and are ready to be flying around in the verse with players?
Only externally.
No.
All right, moving on.
I mean, like the Javelin, for example. I mean, I don't know if you can currently do it in Invictus, but during the the trial stuff during the PTU, you could go in the turret, go in the third person, and clip that camera into the bridge, and that bridge looks exactly like the bridge of the crashed Javelin on Daymar. So like it was made in 2015. It hasn't been. It's not ready yet. Not at all.
Yeah. So I guess most people have probably seen that, when we originally released the Javelin or the Idris, can't remember, one of them into the PU, that people were stealing it and glitching
the
inside
Idris,
it. And, you can probably tell that the interiors aren't done. If you look at the Javelin, there's a bunch of work to get it to where it was for the tour, but beyond that, there is some areas of the ship that are complete, some that just are a little diagram on our internal compliments page to tell us what's going to be in that area. We wanted to get these in and get that kind of player experience with the exteriors, but they are there's a little bit of work left to be done.
That nervous laughter.
Thank God.
Yeah, there's a lot of interior there. Like Ben said, there's bits that aren't done because these ships are primarily squadron. So the thing we've said a lot is we want people's first experiences of them to be in squadron, where it's this living, breathing environment, and there is a marked difference between what is needed for squadron inside those ships and what is needed for a full fat release in the PU, where you have to get to all these components and do things to these components and have interactions with all the seats and the setup for doing all of that. If we were to release them as they are now as to players, they would probably be very disappointed with them, because you couldn't use them as a capital ship. They would just be a overscaled single-seater fighter.
A lot of corridor space.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, really,
there is
with all of these ships.
A lot of difference
that, like,
between the need for squadron and the needs for the full release of the PU.
Who's daily flying a Reclaimer? I mean, you can't do anything with it yet. It'd be the same thing.
It's really cool seeing it, though. I love it.
Yeah.
It's just there's an awful lot of work to go into kind of finishing the capital ships to a point where they you get the gameplay you deserve out of it, rather than just getting, like you say, a shell with some corridors.
I don't think that can be understated. A ship is more than just the art. A ship is more than just the art. The art is an essential. Hey, no. It's an essential and crucial part of it, certainly. But especially as a matter of scale, a capital ship requires so much more as far as gameplay and the expectations of experience, and we definitely want to get those dialed in before we put them out there. It's you said it well. We don't want to put a Javelin out there and then have people just basically flying it around like it's an enormous Hornet.
Yeah.
It's
An enormous hornet, or I mean, like, just like how the 890 jump is currently at the moment. It'd just be so annoying to just like see freaking people using javelins and Idrises for box missions and not, like I don't know. I'm one of those guys. I still want to see it.
I know people want to do that, but that's not what we want for us.
let's see the Tavaran Prowler stealth capabilities are less than ideal. Is this something that will be
really much of a
addressed when the new
prowler,
radar
is
and
it?
scanning systems come online?
Yes. The new radar and scanning system is quite a large change that sort of I don't know how to phrase it. It doesn't reset everything, but it makes the whole system nothing like the current system.
What does that mean? Like, we've seen like a lot of this stuff from ISC. It just looks like a different skin to what we currently have. I'm curious.
And as a result, all the ships are going to behave differently within it to how they do now. And we do want the Prowler to be stealthier. But obviously with such a huge change like that, it's probably going to take a few patches to get everything where we
Huge
want it to sit. There's a lot of big changes coming to vehicle systems in the next few patches, and they are all requiring across the board balance changes. So whilst the initial release you'll notice a big change, there's probably going to be a few outliers that we will need to hit in subsequent patches.
So when they talked about missile operator mode, they also talked about they talked about scanning and scanner operation in the same breath. So here's hoping that when we do get this new scanning tech, we're going to be getting scanner operator mode at the same time, which basically to me means here's hoping that once this tech comes in, somebody sitting in, like, let's say the adjacent seat to the pilot in, like, let's say the freelancer would be able to open up the scanner and actually scan, and then, like, the pilot can use that information. Or like, the mole, for instance, somebody can the co-pilot can scan, and that scanned information can go to, like, the miners and that kind of thing. In multi-crew right now with scanning, there isn't much of if one person scans something, that information doesn't get sent to everybody else. That would be very crucial, I feel.
Okay. Someday, Star Citizen is going to have more planets with oceans. Are you already making plans for ocean-based vehicles?
Maybe.
That'll be my answer.
Maybe. We could start the eternal debate of, does a spaceship work underwater?
How many atmospheres is the ship built for?
Does a spaceship work underwater?
I don't know.
Well, it's a spaceship.
No.
Start there. I always see the argument everywhere.
Very coy here. Being very coy. All right, we'll move on.
Is a spaceship underwater a submarine, or is a submarine in space a spaceship?
It's a supermarine.
This question's going to haunt me for a little while.
Yeah.
Here, we'll do one easier then. What was the rationale behind removing the kitchen from the M2 Hercules?
Yes.
The hot topic.
Indeed.
The original concept layout for the ship, I don't think it certainly never had like the full kitchen that the C2 now has in there, because when we came to build these ships, we almost entirely changed the interior.
I don't think
design and
anybody's
layout.
asking for the
And having
C2
the full
kitchen
kitchenette for
in the
the
M2.
C2 was something that we built in, and then we sort of take it away for the other variants to make it fit in the space. And we probably went a bit too far in taking things away.
Yes, I would say so.
So we'll be looking at, in future patches, a way of getting food-making facilities.
Yeah.
Back on. It won't be the full kitchenette like the C2
No.
has. I can guarantee that, but there will be something on there. There's been some wild suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's some, like, walls and stuff that have, like, what look like bags strapped and tied to them, which we know aren't going to be used for anything because they've already, like, shown and blocked off the places for items for players to put in, like the overhead compartments and storage and stuff like that. Those are the things that you're going to be using that for. So they could just remove that asset and put a little kitchenette in there. I'm sure that's what they'll do.
Barbecue.
Barbecue.
It's a little bit odd as well, because I was actually supposed to be doing it today, but haven't quite got to it yet. But
Doing what today?
looking at the different modules we have for all three variants and what we share between all three variants, you're like, oh yeah, okay, this feels kind of like quite natural, and then you're like, oh no, but that in the next variant puts it, right next to the armor. Or why would you want to be like I don't know, making your coffee, getting you armored up, maybe that works.
It
But
does,
yeah,
you know?
trying to
Why
find
not?
like a natural place for it to fit we'll work something out.
Yeah, the M2 and A2 again is another problem where there is very limited like commonality between the two of them internally.
The M2 and the
Literally just like a
A2.
toilet next to the seats.
Just a hot plate that sits on top of the power plant.
Yeah,
Yes.
Exactly.
pizza oven.
With the physical damage model, there's something we've been hearing about for a while now. With the
physical
physical
damage
damage model, the strength of the ship's armor be defined by? Oh, geez. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to read. With the physical damage model, the strength of the ship's armor will be defined by material and thickness. Are special materials for military and civilian armors planned, and will we be able to change the armor of our ships?
Will we be able to change the Umbro ship?
That's a few questions in one there.
Yeah, no kidding.
So yes, there will be different materials for military and civilian ships, and we can even go down to the granularity of like
C2
this
and
variant
A2.
of the ship has a slightly hardened material that gives it some improved properties.
Yeah.
In
They've
the
done that
first
for a
version
few.
of the physical damage rollout, we would not be letting you swap these things out.
Right.
Whether we change that in the future, that's up for debate internally. But it's going to be such a apocalyptic change to how the game plays when that comes in. Like
Apocalyptic.
as people have predicted, and we've talked about all the existing meta for combat and damage and gameplay will be null and void with it, because you'll be moving away from this DPS race of just decreasing 1,000 hit points to 0 and winning, to moving to targeting specific areas and disabling ships and doing something with those disabled ships.
Yeah, with the first of those subcomponents being the shield emitter on ships. So you want to take that out before you can then start affecting like the hull and that kind of thing. I don't think apocalyptic is the word. Apocalyptic, I mean, end of the world or whatever. So the end of, I think a better word would be like a paradigm shift, like it's basically the same thing, right? Just changing how everybody thinks about one specific kind of thing.
Yeah, I think if you
Go ahead,
think about like the sort of like the sports car analogy, and you get you can get a Porsche that is all aluminium or all metal, and then you get the the top version, the GT3 or whatever that is completely stripped back, and it's got the carbon it's got carbon fiber body panels and
yeah, apocalypse. A new meta will arise from the ashes of the old. Yes, indeed.
carbon roof or whatever it might be. And I guess that's a similar approach we may or may not take to some of our ships.
And
Hopefully
as far as the people in the chat asking when, keep an eye on that public roadmap, folks. That's basically all the best information we have about when is there on the public roadmap, and a lot of folks go through to make sure that's as accurate and updated as it can be. So check that out. And if it's not on there, then don't expect it in the time that it's not on there. Medium fighters have been in an awkward place for quite a while. They don't often offer enough firepower to be worth taking over much more agile light fighters, nor do they have the ability or agility to make up for their smaller components and lack of firepower compared to heavy fighters.
Yeah,
and
medium
larger ships.
fighters are weird.
Are there any current plans to make them more viable? I agree with everything this person said.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you have things like the Vanguard, which just like crushes everything with its like with its meat, and you have the glass cannons like the Hurricane and soon to be the Scorpius, and then you have things like the Arrow, super nimble and able to avoid a lot of fire, and so they can do a lot of damage. And the Arrow, like one of the cheaper, what they call like a fighting starter ship and that kind of thing, can win loads of encounters it goes into, whereas the medium ships are kind of just like left out in the cold, and can get beat up real bad by light fighters.
And this is another thing that we could probably spend an hour alone talking about. I briefly mentioned it earlier with the radar and scanning stuff. So there are other features coming. It's what's to refer to as capacitors, but we're probably going to rebrand it slightly to something more better player face.
Capacitor is already a cool sci-fi word. I don't think there's any need to make it better player facing. What, battery? But like,
because capacitors can give a slightly different impression on what they actually do. But as a result of that, we are literally changing the stats on every single spaceship. So,
but what's it called in Elite Dangerous? Is it not just called capacitor in Elite Dangerous as well? It's the same mechanic.
They are all having changes done to not only handling but health. All the weapons are having some changes done to them in terms of lethality. Ballistic weapons having changes done to their ammo count. So again, it's going to be a huge change, and all the ships are going to have a big shuffle around in terms of their combat prowess. And
that meta is going to change.
As a result of that, certainly from our internal testing, it seems to be the case that those medium fighters are in a better place, because they seem to get overshadowed by the light and the heavy fighters. Everyone just goes, if I want agility, light fighter. If I want to go tankiness, go heavy fighter. And the Hornets in the middle are like, what about me?
So speaking of what about me, that's so sad. But speaking of like ammo changing on things like the Hornet, right? Like way back when in 2.x, you'd have ballistics, but you'd also have ammo boxes, right? And different ships could have ammo boxes based on their size, so you could have more ammo on your ship based on how big it is. That disappeared, and now, like, if you're using, like, let's say a ballistic repeater like a Scorpion of one particular size, it's always going to have that amount of ammo. So is that to say that batteries are, not batteries even, magazines are coming back for ballistic ships or what? But I hope so, because I can't really see what else they could do to change that. But as for like how can you distinguish a medium fighter to a light or a heavy down the line once we get physicalized damage where winning isn't making somebody explode? It'd be nice if you could lose a fight and then limp back home. But I don't think that most people who win, if you win a fight right now, and let's say you're in a commander or even in the verse, you're not gonna just disable their ship so they're spinning out and leave them. If you're watching this and you fight a lot in the verse, right? In the comments on YouTube or even on Twitch, how many times have you crippled a ship and then left them alone? Because you can cripple ships now, unless of course it's an arrow, which just it's immortal until it dies. It's just the same ship until you destroy it. But how many times have you again crippled a ship and then gone, okay, I've won, bye? Never. Unless, of course, you're trying to avoid a crime stat. At least, I don't think I have.
Yeah. And I understand there's some discussion going on right now about the ship archetypes and light fighters. Yeah,
when the repercussions for killing them, sure,
maybe those designations will change in the future or something.
Yeah, they might change in name, but the roles won't really change, but they might just sort of get lumped together in more clear-cut categories.
Right. We're going to see if we can't dive a little bit more into ship archetypes and stuff maybe next quarter for folks who are wondering. It's still being
Do you really say
worked out at the moment. It would be irresponsible to talk too much about it right now. But when we get it more in line, we'll cover that.
Then again, talent fighters deserve what's coming to them, honestly. But yeah, it's cooler to leave a ship spinning and then see what they do. Do they try and stop and then try and fire it to you from a stopped position? Do they self-destruct? Do they eject?
The Nova's main gun has a range of 1.5 kilometers, and that's way too short.
Is it?
Will you consider adjusting it?
Yes. So we did some very last-minute changes before 3.13.1 went live to fix some issues, and it sort of it fixed those issues, but didn't hit all the goals we wanted, and the lack of range was an unfortunate casualty of that, so we'll be looking at that.
I think that Nova's range should be the same amount of range as a missile, or maybe a little bit more, and it'll have bullet drop. Why not?
As kind of a follow-up to the physicalized damage question there, what is the time to kill supposed to be? When all is said and done, we talk a lot about the changes. You just called it an apocalyptic change, to the future.
I'm sure I'm going to regret saying apocalyptic.
Oh yeah, they're already memeing it. So when we're talking about when the new radar, when the new scanning, when the new physicalized damage, when the item components, when the archetype switchover happens, when all is said and done, what are we aiming towards? What are we working towards? What
I think the answer is going to be time to disable, not time to kill.
How long is it supposed to take to kill something like a Constellation versus something like an Idris? And I'm not asking for like specific seconds or anything, but just in general, talk to us about what we're working towards here.
It's a very hard question to answer because there are so many systems at play there. Even with those two like examples of an Idris and Constellation, like if the Idris hits you with that railgun fully charged out the gate, it's going to be seconds. If they miss, then it's going to be much longer. But as a general broad, extremely broad, don't hold me to this in many patches time. It is not going to be the short like 10, 15 seconds that we can experience now in those scenarios where
a saber against an arrow
before you know it. And if you get two good players together, they might stretch to a minute or two dogfighting. It is going to be longer than that. But the experience in that combat will be, whilst it might take a greater time, the actual combat within that time will be a much more intense and exciting thing.
One can hope. That's something to really
this is really one for
think
John
about
to answer. But from my point of view, I guess player skills are going to play a massive input into it. Like you kind of just said. I'm an old World of Warcraft player.
Yeah, I was going to also quote World of Warcraft here because like there's a sweet spot when it comes to like how long you want a fight to be. Right now, you don't want to be deleted in 15 seconds. But like, like a Holy Paladin versus Holy Paladin dueling, or like a Resto Druid versus Resto Druid, you don't want to like have a 1 hour long fight, because that's boring as hell.
And you think some of the boss fights there, you get, some of those can take a decent amount of time, but then by the time you get it down, you know exactly what you're doing.
You don't want player versus player fights to feel like boss fights all the time, though.
You can speedrun most things.
Only if they're using like a big ass ship.
That's it's going to be really exciting when we kind of when we get all these systems on and you can actually have a group conflict with your mates against kind of, I would like playing a bit of the underdog, if that so you try and take out some of these big mean capital ships. It's gonna be awesome.
So like they've talked about before, I think it was Chris even who talked about how he wanted ships to explode and how that was supposed to happen, like apparently he wants the damage of Star Citizen to be like as systemic as possible, where like if there's a massive explosion caused by the engine, it's because the engine exploded, right? So like if during the battle like you hit a pipeline and the fuel to the engine like leaks and the engine can no longer do its thing, then it won't explode when it's destroyed. Or like so if something overheats to a level that causes like a chain reaction explosion, then that will happen. So like then those bigger, more amazing explosions that you see like right now will happen as a result of you doing something very specific. And an example of that would be like when the Idris explodes. When the Idris explodes, if you listen closely to like the sounds of its explosions and see like the chain of events that happen, the last explosion on the Idris right now is that of what sounds like either the jump drive or the quantum drive. They're basically the same thing. They're connected to each other. Like going critical, you see like visually it starts to collapse, like it's going to the quantum, and then it implodes, and then there's an explosion and it twists around. So like, how is that supposed to happen when damage and explosions and stuff become like systemic? Well, maybe perhaps, I don't know, distortion weapons might make it overheat or overload or that kind of thing. But that's the sort of thing that they want to get with those kind of battles. And then most of the time it'd be like you just kind of shoot it till it goes inert, with explosions along the way, but nothing as catastrophic as that unless you earn that explosion.
Yeah, the combat now is definitely not how it's going to be with, not even in the next few patches, but let alone with physical damage, because the combat till then is very much time to kill. Like the outcome of combat is somebody explodes every single time, and that's the only outcome.
That's not what they want.
There is at the moment, and the chance of that happening with physical damage is radically reduced.
Radically reduced is the word he uses.
Like if you do a critical hit to their power plant and it explodes, you're much more likely to then have a disabled ship that either needs boarding or salvaging or tractor beaming away, and then on the flip side of that, it's you in your disabled ship figuring out what you are now going to do as a result of your ship being damaged, because previously you'd just be dead and there's no choice there. But do you stay with your wreck? Do you fight off the attackers? Do you hide on board your ship and hope they don't come and find you? Do you call for backup?
Stow away on your own ship.
Change everything.
Yeah, I think like physical damage for me is really exciting, but also really scary.
It's a terrifying
because,
concept.
Like from an art point of view, it
Yeah.
then does. The way we make our ships has a real impact on their performance. And yes, we will be balancing things with the materials used, and that that will be like how we kind of balance the ships out. But if we always get a little bit of stick for, there's a big empty bit of space behind this wall.
Does anybody
and
ask the
that
question
stuff,
about the C2 and
that
M2
might not necessarily be such a
cargo?
bad thing when you get to proper hull thicknesses and physical damage, and having all your main systems just exposed across the main core of the ship and being there right for the picking versus having them nicely tucked away in the belly of the ship, can make a big difference to the way the ships are going to behave and how combat's going to feel. So yeah, it's super exciting, but a little bit scary.
Yeah,
There's
a lot of content changes will be done to support it, and even if it was just a data behind the scenes data changed, it's a big change, but the content side just makes it this huge thing.
Right. Remind folks in the chat that today's show is about military vehicles, so if you're asking about things like the Constellation and stuff, it's not for this show. I will say, do you have anything planned for the Gladius? It's kind of in a sorry state right now.
So, I mean, the Gladius is in a sorry state in terms of how it flies, but I think they've done a really good job, the gold standard, whatever they're talking about. But yeah, from a balance perspective, how it flies compared to everything else within its class, why would you use one?
Yes.
Not Gladius, geez, Gladiator.
Oh.
Not too sorry. We just
Oh, yeah, okay, Gladiator. What's the Gladiator?
No, the Gladius is great. The Gladius is great. Do you have anything planned for the Gladiator? The Gladiator.
Yeah, we're aware of where it sits.
Are you?
It's not ideal.
What is the Gladiator even at this point? I mean, it's supposed to be a heavy fighter, but it's basically got the same role as the Talon Shrike without being as fast. So it's a heavy bomber. But what ships is it supposed to heavy bomb? I mean, in any scenario, it's going to be wrecked by anything it's supposed to try and kill, right? Right? I mean, when we get the missile operator mode, I'll be very curious to see how it works. But it currently doesn't really seem like it has much of a use anywhere.
A few patches back, we did actually do sort of. It wasn't particularly
It used to be
publicised,
terrifying,
but it did
though.
have some behind-the-scenes tuning done on it to try and boost its ranking up the analytics, and it did actually have a good impact on that.
Really? Does anybody fly
especially
that
with
thing?
Xenothreat, where torpedoes became a menace. It had some very big flaws that were in the setup that had gone untouched for a while. So the Bombay doors, they only had 50 health, which is a stiff breeze, and so when you shot them, you lost half your
useless.
torpedoes because they were attached to the doors.
I see.
So we buffed them up.
Yeah, light
We
bomber,
buffed some
sorry,
of the
yeah.
wing mounts,
Like the
the
Eclipses.
not the gun mounts on the wings, but the actual where the wings attached to the body, because again they had far too lower hit points, and just a strafing shot across the ship. You could, if you did it from underneath, you'd hit the Bombay, it would lose all of its torpedoes. You'd hit a wing, blow that off. You'd lost half your guns,
Pathetic,
half your
really.
missiles. So we did do that pass. From an art side,
So they made it
I
tankier.
think the turret probably is the biggest offender of. It's very much our old methodology of doing turrets, where you're sat in a turret and the pitch is your neck, which isn't a great experience for keeping everything in view, compared to our more modern ships where you sit in a almost ball turret and it moves. And for me personally, that's where I want to go with all our turrets, is have that, because it provides a consistent experience across the board.
So with missile operator mode, would that allow the turret gunner of the Gladiator to use those missiles, I wonder?
You don't have these weird turrets where I'm in this turret and I look up and down and my neck moves, or my neck moves that way because it's fixed, but you're keeping it 1-to-1 with your inputs.
John likes to just cause headaches for me.
Yeah.
And the team to solve.
Pretty much.
JD Binge, the M50, is the M50 a military ship?
It has an interceptor variant, but it's not a military
ship.
ship.
It's a racer/interceptor.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like it's literally called the M50 Interceptor. It kind of makes me hope that they make an M50 racer.
That makes it a military ship, though. I don't remember it having.
Half a question by being half a military ship.
What can you tell us about the M50? Anything? Is there anything you planned for it? I know it was going to get different engines at one point.
You know what? Why is it called the M50 if it's an interceptor and it's not a fighter? They should have called it the M25A. Because, 50 is designated for, like, racers, right? You got, like, the 350R, you've got, like, the 150... No, we don't have a 150, do we? But, like, but yeah, M50 doesn't make any sense anymore to me, because it's an interceptor, and it's supposed to be the racing ship, the performance ship.
Yeah, we still have those second engines to make, but it's just gone down the priority list of things. Like, the art is done, but it requires some work from the tech team, because... We have two ways to set it up, and one is a bad way of setting it up that would get it sooner, and one is the correct way of doing it. The problem being it has two thrusters on the back, and swapping it out changes it to one thruster, so we need to make sure IFCS handles that scenario, which is not a common scenario where we tune a ship and then by attaching an item you lose half your main thrust. So it needs to work with that, and we want to do it the proper way, because then that will allow us to do it to other ships in the future.
Fair.
Okay. We have got 5 minutes left, so let's see if we can do some. Let's see if we can do some lightning round stuff here. See how many of these we can squeeze in before we're done. What's missing in game to make drop ships necessary to carry troops? Nowadays, you can carry like 5 players in the back of a 100i, or even 20 in a Cutlass Black. So why would anyone use a dropship?
What is the point?
The classic clown car question.
Yeah, is it life support?
The big thing that will stop this, or maybe not stop, because I know how tenacious people are doing things, that will disincentivize it, will be the life support system. So the ships are all going to have a life support item on there, and that life support item is going to be tuned for that ship and that ship's crew. So its life support generates the oxygen and scrubs all the carbon dioxide out. So it will be filling it at a rate that the designated crew can consume. So if you've suddenly got 5 people in the back of your 100i that's only designed to take one person, you're going to be using the air 5 times quicker than the system can produce it.
So now here's the question, and I'm sorry for stopping him mid-sentence there. Right, he's talking, I mean, again, he's just talking, right? But he's saying that life support will be based on crew designation. I hope that it's not that, and it's just going to be an arbitrary size thing, size 1, size 2, size 3, size 4, like we currently have for everything else. If anything, just because something like the C2 Hercules is rated for 2 people. The Hercules. That means that the Hercules is rated for the same life support as the Hurricane is. So I get what he's saying, but I don't think that what he means there is exactly what he means,
Very basic, simplistic level. So I guess the air's going to run out and you're going to be stuck in your spacesuits, and then you're going to use your spacesuit air, and then bad things are going to happen.
It looks a lot cooler as well, doesn't it? Rather than like trying to just farm a bunch of people out the back of a 100.
Also, the M2 Hercules, for instance, the M2 has what? It's designated for 3 crew. It has 3 beds and 3 seats in the bridge, but it also has 6 or something jump seats in the back, or 8 jump seats in that auxiliary room, and the Cutlass as well, designated for 2 to 3 people, but it has 6 jump seats in the back. So I don't think it's going to be based on crew, as John said, but more based on the size of the life support. So size 1, size 2, size 3. I think that'll probably be where it'll be at.
To actually be proper drop ship.
Force reactions are the other thing, and we've seen more iterations of that come in where
Open the door.
if you crash into things, your person gets thrown across the floor. or when the ship's
force
banking,
reactions,
you're staggering and you can't move. So if you're not actually strapped in a seat, and a bad player hits the ground a bit too hard in their drop, you're not getting chucked. Myself personally, I've been thrown out of ships in our design playtest where someone's been doing low flying and we've clipped the ground, and I've been stood on the back ramp foolishly, and it's just thrown me out the ship, and I've died when I probably should have been sat in the seat.
Out of ships.
Hey.
How about elevators?
Chat, you want me to waste some time on this? Okay, Kraken. Anything you can tell us about Kraken? It's not a military ship.
I'll take time thinking about that, but there's no more news. It's not in active development.
Yeah. Okay. Guys, it's got a theme.
According
Is the
to
Saber
Drake, it
Raven
is
considered a military vehicle?
Not for me. That's not to say there is a line of law somewhere that says it is a military vehicle, but it is, for me, it's not to the same military standard as the base Saber. Brain completely gone there.
Yeah. Let's see. Will the Nova fit in a Polaris with your upgraded hangar?
The Nova
if
tank.
you can load it in from the top somehow, I guess.
Yeah, because the Polaris doesn't have a ramp like the same way like some of these other ships have, like for a garage, like the Carrack or like the 890. It's just got that top side one instead.
Let's see. It's the
Parachute attachment coming.
Yeah.
now that the Nova has treads, will you revisit the Vanguard landing gear?
Aha.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
I was going to say yes, but John sounded a little bit more hesitant, so maybe not.
It's yes, but
Okay,
it's
good.
a low priority.
Right. Okay.
We want to. We got rid of them in the original Vanguard, and then we brought them back when we redid it. And it's the same with any ships that have wheeled gears. We want to have them actually function like they look. So you could do rolling taxiways, but
because they've the same way they have the tech for the Nova tank and the tread wheels there. Like they now have the tech for rolling wheels. They actually got that tech in for trolleys, so they could just extrapolate that for the landing gears. But I imagine, as it is with the Vanguard's landing gears, it's a low priority.
In the grand scheme of things, it is very low down the list to spend programmer time on.
Why does the Terrapin have 2 seats, pilot and scanner, but only 1 bed?
Because
it's a one-person ship. You're not expected to fly and scan with that big radar dish at the same time.
Really? Why? Why not? Like in the brochure for the Terrapin, one of its uses was to be used in combat. So you'd want somebody to be flying around while the other person is in scanner operator mode, doing deep scan cuts of the enemy fleet and relaying that information back to your crew. John?
How come when I run over players with the tank, it doesn't obliterate them? That sounds like something for the actor feature team. Let's see. All right, last one. How is player-facing modularity progressing? Player-facing modularity, we introduced the idea of it. What was it, back in 2015? What can you tell us about?
Possibly.
Lots of ships.
Yo, Glitch, thanks for the raid.
There's quite a few ships that we've promised with it. They're all still going to have it. We in the near future are putting the vehicle tech team on actually doing the tech to allow this, and we're going to start with the Retaliator, and they
Wait,
are
what was
they
that?
are things.
We introduced the idea of it. What was it, back in 2015? What can you tell us about?
Possibly.
Lots of ships.
Yep, there's quite a few ships that we've promised with it. They're all still going to have it.
Modularity, yeah.
We in the near future are putting the vehicle tech team on actually doing the tech to allow this, and we're going to start with the Retaliator.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the first one to go gold standard.
They are
2
simply
months
working
from now.
on the tech first, and we want to get that functional, and then we will work out when we release the actual modules. They may not be the same time frame. You may get the tech in first, and then
I
spend
see. Okay.
a quarter or 2 working on those modules to because they were done quite a long time ago, they're like the seats are not quite to the current standards.
So that's the danger, really, I feel, of this roadmap for certain features, especially when that was on, I think it was on release view as well. Like they're talking about like modularity on the Retaliator, right? He's saying that the actual tech, like for modularity, so that you're able to put in another room in there, you know, like it is you know, scheduled for whenever, but it doesn't mean that the actual modules are going to be ready yet. So it's a confusing one, because like, you know, wouldn't you want to have at least one module put inside? Well, again, that's kind of one of the shortcomings I feel of the roadmap. But it's weird that he's saying this when the roadmap kind of made you expect a module. That being said, that's now been pushed from 3.14 to 3.15, so that probably now gives them time to have at least one module with that tech. Otherwise, people would freak out and cry wolf if you know, 3.14 came, it was delivered, but we didn't actually have anything to show for it.
We will do that. The technical issue with it at the moment is we need to have object containers for these rooms that swap out.
Okay.
They need to be items that swap in and out, but we need to have that link between the contents of that room and the parent ship. So on the Retaliator, you have those torpedoes, so they need to be self-contained within this room. You detach it, and you can put another room in there. Because if you did that at the moment, you just have these two torpedo arms dangling through your recreation room. So it is planned. We're still working on it. It's not a cut feature like I see plenty of people saying that we're never doing it again, and we just do it in select circumstances. Not every ship is going to have a modular feature.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like the only ships
Okay.
promised for modularity, I believe, are actually on the stretch goals. Like it's the final stretch goal for Star Citizen, like, you know, during that whole funding phase. Like the Hornet, the Cutlass, I believe, the Retaliator, and I think there's only really one other ship that's been promised to have modularity in this sense. Everything else is just kind of whatever it is. They may have variants, but modules specifically, not so much. They kind of like, they're in this like rough spot where they have to do modularity, but it's not something that they can do for every ship.
So I'll say that
I don't think the Caterpillar is on it. I think that we'll actually spend some time on this to actually look, because I don't remember exactly which ships are on it, but I want to make sure that I'm, you know, factual when I do this stuff. So let's go ahead and hop onto the website, and I believe if we go to development and funding, so the far right tab here, you can actually have a look all the way down here at the last stretch goal for funding, and that was enhanced ship modularity. So it says, so you have the ship of your dreams, but you really wish it could be customized to suit your needs a bit more than the off-the-shelf models. This new goal, a massive undertaking, is going to be of interest. We're looking to overhaul any suitable ships, including the Cutlass, Avenger, Retaliator, and Redeemer. So those are the only ships. I mean, like, they say including, right? But because it says including, it's kind of like, unless they mention any other ships here, these are the ones that are more or less promised. But including kind of means that they've promised these ships here. I don't know if the Cutlass Red and Blue were announced back when this goal was a thing. Maybe the Red and Blue are those modules. I don't know. But it says to allow many modular components to be available as swap outs. For example, if you have purchased a Redeemer, then using this new system, you would have a variety of new modules available to refit the ship, internal and external, to suit your play requirements. If you want to make it a bounty hunter ship, then you could buy a stasis chamber module for the lower deck, and you'll be able to capture and store fugitives to be delivered for their bounties at your leisure. You could configure the upper deck to be outfitted with a long-range communication suite, allowing you to keep in touch with your info agent even when in deep space. Fed up with bounty hunting? Swap in a larger cargo module in the lower deck to make that profitable run you've been planning for a while. Or add the Explorer module with a deployable vehicle for some planet-side recon. Adding like a Nox Bay or something to your Redeemer. Manufacturers will still be offering pre-configured variants, but should you be looking to adapt a hull to suit a certain task, then your ship has come in and is now ready for modification. So that's that for that. And again, they've only really promised it with 1, 2, 3, 4 ships, and also the Hornet too, because the Hornet's like central circular thing is supposed to be a cargo bay and a turret and whatever else. Maybe you can like make somebody go in the fetal position and chuck them in there for bounty storage. Who the heck knows, man? But yeah. Anyway, that's that.
It touches on the the feature team may have time in their schedule to be tackling some of this stuff, but that might not necessarily align fully. Where possible, we're always trying to line this stuff up, but the company's pretty big and everyone's working on a lot of things at once. So it's not always the case that we can go, okay, cool, the feature team is finished on X week, and then Y week we just start on the art, because sometimes Y week we might be 2 months away from closing out a capital ship or a single seat or whatever it might be, that we actually we need laser focus on this, and we can't afford to just like up and leave to finish
Right.
priorities.
Yeah, so like the modules they mentioned there don't necessarily mean those are the only modules. There are other modules that they showed off when they released the or when they sold the Retaliator, including like a living quarters module, which wasn't mentioned there, and also a dropship module as well. So the other things could exist. I don't have a source for the quantum interdiction on the Caterpillar, but it is a Caterpillar, it is a Drake ship, so it doesn't surprise me.
All right, gentlemen, that's it. Thank you so much for taking the time. We're actually over time now, so I got to let you go. I know you got reviews to get to. Folks, 3.13.1 is live on the live servers now. Invictus launch week begins.
So that's that for Star Citizen Live. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting or enjoyable or whatever. And yeah, if you did like this, feel free as always to like and subscribe and hit the notification button if you're watching on YouTube. And I'll see you next week for the next one. Until then,